Welcome, everybody, to a conversation with Hillel Schenker and Ziad AbuZayyad, co-editors of the Palestine-Israel Journal, published in Israel, Palestine. This meeting today is co-sponsored by the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace and Security and the Israel-Palestine NGO Working Group at the United Nations. My name is Doug Hostetter. I am co-chair of the Israel-Palestine NGO Working Group at the UN and the director of the Mennonite Central Committee. We are so fortunate to have these incredible speakers with us here today, the co-editors. They are here to share with us a perspective, both a Palestinian and Israeli perspective, on the most recent elections and the prospects for the future. I think at this point we will open for questions. When you have a question, I would ask you to identify yourself and the organization you work with. And because we are recording this, if you don't mind, if you would come up front, it will assist with things, and we'll let you have the mic here.
Okay, Bruce Knotts, Chair of the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace and Security and Director of the Unitarian Universalist UN Office. We're talking about a one-state solution or a two-state solution, and I'm wondering if there's a hybrid in between. And the example that sort of immediately comes to my mind is Switzerland, where you have a canton system not based on religion, but based on language. So you have French-speaking areas, Italian-speaking areas, Swiss-speaking areas, German-speaking areas. Could that not be a model for Israel-Palestine, which could be the name of a new one state, that would have cantons with Hebrew-speaking Hebrew-speaking areas and Arabic-speaking areas, with every person having, one person, one vote for a national government? And would that not be a more fruitful way of exploring those possibilities instead of going down the two tracks that we seem to have at the moment, which is a two-state solution, which doesn't seem to be working, and a one-state apartheid solution, which is going to lead to all of the disasters that you've so ably predicted?
Okay, just of course, everybody feels that it's time for new thinking. What we have done so far, what we have attempted so far, hasn't worked. There already was a well-known Israeli, Aryeh Lofer Eliav, who already back in the early 70s and later in the 80s, he wrote a book which I would recommend called The Land of the Heart in English, Eretz HaTzvi. And he was advocating something called Isfalur, Israel, Palestine, Urdin, a confederation of Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. Now, I think there is room for new thinking. At the same time, those who advocate a one-state solution, in my view, both Israelis and Palestinians have suffered so much mutual trauma in the ongoing conflict between them, whether we look at it as a 100-year-old conflict or since 1948, a 70-year-old conflict, that I do not see the ability to be living together in one state peacefully at this point. And then I would add a second factor, that although here we are with the wonderful vision behind us of the post-World War II UN, which was moving towards a more universal vision of the relationship between nations and peoples. The fact is that in the post-Cold War era, we see the national impulse is much stronger than at least I had imagined, and I think most people. The breakup of the Soviet Union into so many pieces, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, the difficulty that Belgium has in keeping together, Spain with the Basques and the Catalonians. We still have to go through that stage of national self-determination for both sides before we reach the point of having federation, confederation, but definitely there is room for new thinking and new formulas to be placed on the table.
Well, I think it's the problem is much more complicated than some people believe. The late Muammar Gaddafi suggested a one-state called Isra'il, and he said we take Isra from Israel and Tin from Palestine, so it is Isra'il. The problem is that the Israelis or the Jews doesn't want to share the state with anyone. They want a Jewish state. So to think about a one state with the Zionist ideology, they cannot work together. And I remember that once I was touring the United States together with an Israeli from Peace Now movement, and when I spoke about one state and I said we can live together, he said, well, I can share with you a grocery, but I can't share with you a state. So if they don't want to share a state with us, at least we can share the land. So, and to share the land is only by having a two-state solution, a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel. I want to remind you that the platform of the PLO and the Fatah movement in the very beginning of the occupation 67 and even before the occupation from 65, it was that we are in favor of a democratic, secular state where Jews and Arabs and Christians can live together in one state and the loyalty will be for the state. But then the whole world started telling the Palestinian leadership that no one will buy this argument. No one will accept the democratic state because the whole world sympathizes with the Jews and they want to see a Jewish state. And therefore, you should accept the two-state solution. And gradually, the PLO changed its position. And in 88, clearly and officially, in November 88, they accepted 242338 and combined that with the resolution 181 to set the principle of partition, but also to tell the Israelis that we are not asking for the borders of the partition plan, but we are ready to go along with 242, which says to respect the integrity of the states which were existing at that time. But and we changed our position, and we start talking about two-state solution, but it's obviously that the Israelis doesn't want a two-state solution. They want the land. Their appetite for the land is unlimited. And I live in Azariah, Bethany, and we call it Azariah after Lazarus because we have in Bethany Lazarus' tomb. And they took our land close to the last house in the village. And now we don't have any space for a school or for a cemetery. Our cemetery is full, and we don't know where we can bury our dead. And we are using now the same grave to bury more and more people in the same grave. And we cannot expand 1 inch out because they just cut around the village and built the settlement of Mali Adumim and Kidar and took the land between the two settlements. And now they say, the hell with you, manage yourself how you want. And at the same time, and as I said earlier, they always build in the West Bank. And now there's a new generation in the settlements which doesn't recognize the Palestinians. And they are attacking the Palestinians and provocating the Palestinians. And the most frightening phenomenon is that the whole Israeli community is moving towards the right wing, and that there is a legitimization of the settlements movement, and there are members of the Knesset living in the settlements, there are ministers living in the settlements, there are army officers living in the settlements, and all these people, they will be against evacuating the settlements because it is contradict with their interests. So the process is going on. The chances for the two-state solution are gone. And the international, many people are still talking about the two-state solution. And when Israelis, nice Israelis, liberal Zionists, speak about two-state solution, I ask them, okay, where will be the Palestinian state? Tell me, where shall my state be? What do you want to do with me? We are in the West Bank, 2.5 million Palestinians. In Gaza, 1.8 million Palestinians. What are you going to do with us? You continue killing the process and creating facts on the ground, and no more two-state solution. And you don't want one-state solution. So what do you want to do with us?
Elias Malin, Catholic Near East Welfare. Years ago, I said that I thought peace in the Middle East would be the most destabilizing thing possible. It seems in the Middle East, you need enemies to take your mind off your own problems. So are we talking about a two-state solution or a four-state solution? A four-state solution, one capital is in Gaza City, the other is in Ramallah. The state of Israel, its capital is in Tel Aviv or in Mea She'arim. I mean, so that when you talk about two states, that's presuming that each of the states is a unified thing that can actually, that there's somebody in either of those states that can talk for even the majority of the people. And in point of fact, that's not the case. You can get, you can get diplomats working for years and years and years. And some crazy person in Gaza can light a rocket, or some settler can shoot a farmer, and all the work that's done is now you got a war again. So that I think what both sides need to do is to stop using the other side to excuse it from looking at its own internal problems.
I think that what you have said also brings us back to some of the things that Bruce was saying about cantons. And the truth is, within Israel too, I must say that there are a lot of people, a lot of my friends, and a lot of people in my vicinity in general who would be happy to see the settlers and the extreme religious off in their own state, and let us have our tolerant, free Israel in accordance with the principles of the Declaration of Independence, which are actually very humanistic principles when you read it. And so this is part of, I think, the new thinking that we have to think about. But at the same time, I'd like to comment on, is a two-state solution still possible? Which was being talked about, what also Ziad mentioned. I still believe it is, and I would also recommend that people read articles that have been written. There's also a book only in Hebrew so far by Shaul Arieli. Shaul Arieli was a colonel in the army, and he was one of the people who, when Barak was prime minister, was head of a peace negotiations department in the government. He has written articles and books explaining why it is still possible. If we remember when Olmert and Abbas were negotiating, the position that Abbas presented was that we are talking about two states based on the 1967 borders, with the West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem as the capital of the Palestinian state, with mutually agreed upon land swaps, an element which would also be in any UN Security Council resolution. Now, Abbas was saying we're ready to have a land swap of 1.9%. Olmert was saying 6.5%. What Shaul Arieli says is that when you look at the map and the geographical breakdown, you will see that within 6 to 7% of the land adjacent to the West Bank border, the Green Line, 80% of the settlers are living, which would leave only 100,000, only, I mean, there's 100,000 and growing, outside of such a mutually agreed upon land swap. Therefore, anyone who says it's not possible, I think that the facts show otherwise, and yet there's no question that we are in danger. Of course, continued expansion of settlements will make it that much more difficult. We are still in a situation where it is possible. And on the other hand, we are clearly, there was a very important speech made by Meir Dagan, the former head of the Mossad, who was a right-winger, who was working with, actually helped to run Sharon's campaign. And he got up 3 weeks ago, he's very sick today, harshly critical at a major anti-Netanyahu demonstration in Tel Aviv, harshly critical of Netanyahu, saying he is leading us nowhere and that we are moving towards an apartheid reality, definitely in the West Bank. And yes, we all see that this is definitely the reality in the West Bank, and not necessarily in the state of Israel, Israel proper, as we call it, but we are all responsible for what is developing, and so there's a lot of work to do, but it is still possible.
Well, I think it's unfair to simplify the problem and say that you put the blame of your internal problems on the other side. It's not the case. The case is that there are people under occupation. What you want to do with these people? We are not blaming anyone for it, but we want to get rid of the Israeli occupation. And we contributed. We were ready to recognize Israel on the 78% of the land of Palestine, the mandatory Palestine. And yet they want to share with us the 22%. And after they wanted to share the 22%, they started undermining this sharing, and they want to take the whole 22%. And this conflict, if it continues, we are heading towards a religious conflict. Fanatic religious Jews are breeding fanatic religious Muslims. And you will hear many people now saying that it's only the Islamic State which can confront with the Jewish state. Because for the Arabs and for the Muslims, they don't see Jewish as a nationality. It's very difficult for them to understand that Jewish is a nationality, and it's very difficult for many Jews also, because not every Jew in the world is a Zionist. And when you say Jewish, I say Muslim. It's ironically, Israel is the first state in the Middle East based upon religion. Like it or not, this is the case. And they are pushing the whole region towards this direction of a religious war between Muslims and Jews. And is this what they want? Okay. Now we have a time bomb, which is Al-Haram al-Sharif. They are trying to change the status quo of Al-Haram al-Sharif, Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and bring Jews to pray in Al-Haram al-Sharif. Al-Haram al-Sharif doesn't belong to the Palestinians. It belongs to the Muslims all over the world. And if they do something in Al-Haram al-Sharif, they will incite the whole Islamic world against Jews everywhere, not only in Israel. So this is why I say that this state is becoming dangerous, not only to the Palestinians, but to the whole region and to the world, like it or not. So it's not we putting blame on the others for our problems. It's we who want to live in peace and dignity and security like any other people in the world.
Hi, my name is Lisa Caswell. I'm here on my own time. I work in early childhood education, and I'm a church member, but I'm here as myself. Could you just speak more about where you see possible pragmatic alliances around the issue of boycott and the more direct steps you referred to at the beginning, of how we could proceed on those lines, given what you just said about the imminent opportunity we have now with Netanyahu? The fact that he opened his truth, and now we have an opportunity to take action collectively around boycott.
Well, there's a call to boycott and disinvest in Israel. And there is an argument even between myself and Hillel about this issue. So people like Hillel, they say, well, we can agree on boycotting the Jewish settlements in the occupied territories, but not on boycotting Israel or imposing sanctions on Israel. I say that, well, it's always the Israelis can bypass any boycott by the international community and continue to make their business. For example, many of the settlements, they have now addresses inside Israel, and they label their products as if they are in Lod or other areas in Israel, and they export to Europe. If Israel is not abiding by the international law and is not accepting to end the occupation and is dragging the whole region to confrontation between Muslims and Jews, and is not respecting the human values, then there should be someone who will stop the Israelis. Do you want another Nazi Germany? Another Holocaust? To wake up again and say, well, we did not expect it to go that far? And therefore, as what happened with South Africa, it should happen with Israel. And South Africa, without sanctions and without boycott, they could not change their policy, and the apartheid regime would have continued until now. And believe me, it is for the sake of the Israeli people as well as for the sake of the Palestinian people. It's not one side who will win from this thing. And we are ready, as Palestinians, we are ready for everything. We are ready for a binational state, and we are ready for a state alongside Israel. We believe that Palestine, the mandatory Palestine, is a small area, and it's too small to have two states. But if the Israelis want a Jewish state, we will accept to divide that land into two states. And we leave the future for the coming generations to decide how the relation between these two states will be.
Let me just say briefly that first of all, public opinion in both societies, in Israeli and Palestinian society, still the majority support a two-state solution. However, on both sides, the majorities don't see how it can be achieved in the foreseeable future. And I would like to also make it very clear that if I was referring before to the very far-reaching negotiations between the Ehud Olmert government and the Mahmoud Abbas government back in the middle 2000s, clearly the latest round, the one here that Kerry facilitated, it is Netanyahu and the Israeli government which was the primary obstacle, not ready to put a clear proposal on the table about what the borders that they are ready to consider. So I do not relieve the Israeli government of any of the responsibility, and I agree with Ziad that we are facing an extremely dangerous situation in terms of the issue of boycott. If BDS could achieve a resolution, an end to the occupation, the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel, as a non-violent tactic, I would be all in favor. I do not think that that will be the key to making the change. I do not see any government in the international scene ready to take governmental action which would consist of boycott, divestment sanctions. What I do see a readiness for and very much support is boycott of anything to do with the the West Bank settlements, the whole issue of setting very clear parameters. This is the idea of a new UN Security Council resolution with clear parameters for what the future Palestinian state should look like alongside the Israeli state. And clearly this is also in the deepest Israeli interest, not only the Palestinian interest. We feel a sense of urgency, and we need to see the conflict resolved.
just to clarify, Chair, the one other issue that has often come up in the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement is divestment or boycotting of corporations that are benefiting from the occupation or from the oppression of Palestinians.
International?
Yeah, both Israeli and international. I mean,
Yeah.
things like security companies or Caterpillar or things like this.
Sure, totally understood and agreed.
Yeah. Okay, other questions? Ann?
I found myself, and like their NGO committee under some peace and security, I was sympathetic to what Bruce Knotts said at the beginning, but I have a further question. Supposing there were an effort to have all of those in the West Bank have a vote, and everyone in Gaza have a vote, is that something that there's been an effort to push? Because then you might arrive at the kind of solution that Bruce was talking about.
A vote within the Israeli context?
Yeah,
Or
one state thing where
Yeah.
literally
Correct.
all of the occupation.
One state, but maybe evolving somewhat the way
Yeah.
you mentioned.
Of course, a very one man and woman, one vote, and we all just, at least I saw Selma, and we just saw the 50th anniversary, I think it was, of the March on Selma for voting rights. And we saw also Netanyahu in the latest election using the fact that the Israeli Arab citizens, the Palestinian Arab citizens, who are 20% of the Israeli population, were going out to vote because of the joint lease. We saw that Netanyahu was using this as a fear factor to mobilize his base. At the same time, to be realistic, I do not see, definitely not the Netanyahu government, but I don't see any foreseeable Israeli government, also if it were led by Herzog, accepting the idea of having a one-state reality where everybody is voting.
You call yourself a democracy. How can you leave out?
Totally agreed. What we have is a democracy only for Israeli citizens, and we have a totally undemocratic situation with all of the Palestinians who are living under occupation, and Gaza, that's another, but the Gaza is also besieged, even if it's not physically with Israeli troops there. There's no question, totally undemocratic reality.
Yeah.
But is anyone raising this or thinking that internationally it can be raised?
Well, you are right. Yani, first of all, for me as a Palestinian, I am in favor of giving me equal rights with the Israeli Jews, because in this case, this is the national state which I want. So give me the full rights and let me vote, and call the state whatever you want. I don't mind about the name, but I mind that give me full rights like Hillel. If this right will be given to every Palestinian in the West Bank and Gaza Strip and East Jerusalem, that's fine. Now, we hear some voices, even from the Likud and the right-wing camp, who say that we should annex the occupied territories, but without giving political rights to the Arabs. So they want us to be sub-citizens. We don't have any political rights, and they want to annex the occupied territories. And there are many people on the right wing who believe that de facto this is what they are doing in the West Bank.
If I may add one more comment, following what Ziad just said, the newly elected Israeli president, Reuven Rivlin, is a perfect example, actually, of somebody who came out of the right. He is a revisionist, he is from the Likud, who is in favor of greater Israel, a one-state solution, and he would also include democratic rights of voting, but he is in the tremendous minority when it comes to the right. And let me just add one other fact that we have on the ground, the fact of the situation in Jerusalem. We today have a situation where 60% of the citizens of Jerusalem are Jewish, 40% almost are Palestinian. And the Israeli government claims that after 1967 it unified the city. And so there, at least in the municipal elections, the Palestinians of East Jerusalem have the formal right to vote. They choose not to. Out of the 300,000 Palestinians who are in East Jerusalem who could change the character of who's going to be the mayor of Jerusalem, only 15,000 have voted. All of the others choose not to because they say, no, we want to vote within a Palestinian context in a Palestinian parliament for a Palestinian government.
This point which Hillel is raising, it should be clarified. East Jerusalem is an occupied territory. If the Arabs in East Jerusalem agree to participate in the elections for the municipality under the Israeli law, they will be recognizing the Israeli legal constituency in the occupied city of Jerusalem. And we cannot legitimize the annexation of East Jerusalem or accept to give recognition to the Israeli constituency, legal constituency on East Jerusalem. We see Israel as an occupying power. We are ready to vote for a separate municipality for East Jerusalem. But to annex East Jerusalem unilaterally, and you say, well, I want to have elections in the city according to the Israeli law and Israeli sovereignty, we cannot be part of that game.
My name is Nick Fernandez, and I actually came here to see Doug, who I've not seen in 50 years, and he has grown older. I'm from Philadelphia, and I've been involved in interfaith activity for a long time, and I've been involved in a lot of the international problems we've had here. So first of all, you all can do what you want to do over there. You figure that out. That is not my problem. Okay? We've learned that in Vietnam. How should we settle Vietnam? In the anti-war movement, there are 30 different ways we thought of doing it. Turns out they were all pretty good, and then we had nothing to say about it when it happened. Vietnam was going to become a communist country. What do we find 30 years later? It's going to be as capitalist as most of the countries in that part of the world, with a communist government. Who would have said that? I mean, who would have figured that out? The Berlin Wall will not fall down. It fell down. Mandela will die in jail. He didn't die in jail. So anybody who says it won't happen soon or it'll take a long time, just say to yourself, he doesn't know any more than I do. We do not know these things. The question is, are there issues of justice that we need to look at, and what can we do? And my view is, anything that embarrasses the government of Israel all the time, everywhere, or confronts it all the time, anywhere, is good. And I'll let God, when it's all over and it's settled, decide which one really was wrong-headed. Really, who missed the mark? I'm saying this, assuming we're not talking about violence here. Boycotts, protests, letters to the editor, embarrassing governments, Israeli government leaders when they go to France or Washington, anything. The internet, but the question for us is, unlike you, is whether the international community, beginning in this country, has the muscle and the conscience to do that. You know that we have problems because our best friends are Jews. We have walked in marches with them to protest civil rights, to end the Vietnam War. So it's not like these people are distant. They're our best friends. They're our best friends. And some of them very anti-Zionist, but some aren't, right? And when they see us down at the Israeli embassy protesting, they won't like that, and it can break up friendships. So I think for us, you know, there are many ways in which to be engaged and active, but no matter what's happening in that part of the world, our task remains quite large and significant, and I would argue complicated. I think we need therapists here, almost as much as political scientists. It's a very complicated matter.
I don't think that wasn't really a question. And so
I'm sure you'll find something to say.
Yes, exactly. I think that I greatly appreciate what Dick said right now. And I'd like to say also something else. I have on my desk in the Palestine-Israel Journal, in the Wadi Joe's neighborhood of East Jerusalem, which will be the future capital of a future Palestinian state. On my desk, I have a piece of the Berlin Wall. And whenever anybody comes to the office, I always, in talking with them, show them that piece of the wall. It took 28 years, but it came down. And I say that the wall that also exists between the separation, we call it the separation wall at the Palestine-Israel Journal. There are those who will call it the apartheid wall, and there are those and the Israeli government calls it the security fence. That wall will come down because inevitably, as Lov Eliyahu, who I mentioned before, we are Siamese twins, Israelis and Palestinians. Our fates are inevitably intertwined. And so, you know, assuming that we don't arrive at mutually assured destruction, mad, which is also, I suppose, possible, we have the sense of urgency. And yes, all of you have a major role. From our point of view, we have one of the articles that will be in our next issue on the Palestinian Internationalization Campaign is written by Dr. Alon Lial, who is a good friend of ours. He was the Director General of the Israeli Foreign Ministry and also the Israeli ambassador to both South Africa and to Turkey. He launched an initiative of prominent Israelis reaching out to the European Parliament saying, recognize a Palestinian state. It is not only for the sake of the Palestinians, it is for the sake of us Israelis that we call upon you to recognize a Palestinian state, because when there will be clear borders for the state of Palestine and independence for the Palestinian people, there will also be security and borders for the state of Israel. And he added at our last conference, what I am doing as a Zionist act. There is nothing that could be more for the sake of the future of Israel than a resolution of a conflict and an ending of the occupation. So anything that you can do to help this process move forward, and we are happy to be partners in moving this forward, giving you advice and accepting questions and seeking ways of moving forward.
Other questions?
Hi, my name is Grove Harris. I'm with the, do I really have to?
It's a good exercise.
Yeah.
Grove Harris with the Temple of Understanding, one of the oldest interfaith organizations in the U.S. And this is going to sound weird, but what about a calamity that would force cooperation? I mean, in the interfaith movement, there's, you know, people want to look at each other face to face, see if they can get understanding, and that always has its potentials and limits. But then there's ways of potentially standing shoulder to shoulder. I know that some of the water problems, you know, have been contentious, but have also had some possibilities of some cooperations. And I just feel like I have seen some shift in terms of hearing Palestine represented at the UN and hearing this subtext in other discourses at the UN as a key problem. Obviously, I mean, a solution is so important because of the kinds of terrorism, fanaticism that are going around the globe, and I feel like we're all called to try and think of ways to end that. I'm not putting the blame on that anywhere, but I'm just wanted to ask you if you want to think outside of the box. If something horrific like a complete drought happens, might that have a silver lining?
Ziad, you want to answer?
Okay. Our most recent issue was devoted to natural resources and the Arab-Israeli conflict. Every issue has a central theme. And here, clearly, we know that there was a wonderful article which was called "Mosquitoes Don't Need Visas." Yes. Co-written by an Israeli and a Palestinian scholar about the fact that, yes, of course, any environmental, climatic, and other such, related questions are cross-border and they require joint activity. And we had, as we always do, after every publication of an issue, we had a public conference in Jerusalem in which we talked about this. Now, one of the discussions was that, yes, everybody agrees there were Israeli specialists and there were Palestinian specialists. The Israelis were emphasizing the need to work together now. The Palestinians were saying, yes, there are certain things we have to do now, but there are things we cannot do unless and until we have our independence, and then we will be on equal footing and we can work together. So I don't know about, a science fiction type of meteor coming and hitting Jerusalem, but the fact is that we might be heading towards all forms of calamity. And there is no question that it's in the deep interest of both the Israelis and the Palestinians to resolve this conflict and to be able to reach the full potential of the type of partnership that we could have.
It's not easy, and all this issue of cooperation, it's not easy, because you can't cooperate with your occupier. And there are many Palestinians who are becoming so much tensed that they see anything, any joint activity with the Israelis, they call it normalization with the occupation. And they are against it. And there are Palestinians who think that there are allies on the Israeli side and that they, the Israelis and Palestinians, should work together because they have a joint interest. So you can find those people and you find the other people. At the same time, there is the Palestinian Authority, which is under occupation, still not a state, and there is the state of Israel. But there are issues which they, in spite of everything, they cooperate on them. Like, for example, the question of the Ebola or any epidemic disease, that it is, as Hillel said, mosquitoes doesn't have passports, and that the Ministry of Health on the Palestinian side and the Ministry of Health on the Israeli side, through the civil administration, they cooperate together. They exchange information. They try to work together, because these issues are very humanitarian issues that you cannot weigh them according to political considerations. There was a time when there was a huge collapse of a new building in El Bira, and about 13 workers were trapped under the new ceiling, which fell down, and the fire brigades came from Beit El, the Jewish fire brigades came from Beit El to help to save these people. There was the fire which took place in Haifa a couple of years ago, I don't remember, 2-3 years ago, and fire brigades went from the West Bank, Palestinian fire brigades went from the West Bank to participate in putting off the fire in Haifa forest. So there are some humanitarian cases that you have no choice, you have no option, you have to cooperate, you have to work together for it. But still, I must say that politics are poisoning our life. Everything is politics. Now, there are many Palestinians who say that we should boycott the Israeli products. You go to the supermarket, you buy milk, you say, is this Israeli or Palestinian? You go to buy fruits or vegetables, you look on the fruits and the vegetables and you see whether they are Israeli or Palestinian. You buy bread, you look if it is angel bread or it is Palestinian bread. So our life is not easy. And it will not be easy as long as there is occupation.
Just a little anecdote that I and all of my friends, we do not buy products that are manufactured in the occupied territories. And every time there is wine or beer I checked to see where it was manufactured. One of the members of our editorial board is Professor Galia Golan, world-renowned expert, originally a Sovietologist, then she founded the first women's studies department at the Hebrew University, and now she is an expert on conflict resolution, particularly on the Middle East. She was invited once to a conference in Oxford, and they said very proudly, "We brought Israeli wine, and so that you will feel at home." And she said, "Where was the wine manufactured?" And they said, "It's in the Golan Heights." And she said, "Even though my name is Golan, I refuse to buy wine from the Golan Heights because that too is occupied." And my son also says he wanted to take a trip to the Golan Heights, and I said, "I had enough being on the Golan Heights during the Yom Kippur War. I am not ready to go there again unless I have a visa to go there." So we have this issue, and one of the many components of what we are dealing with.
Yes, please.
Fran Butensky, representative of the International Council of Jewish Women. One thing I would like to say, I would just like to refute the facts that you're giving about the water situation, because I know for a fact, and I've read it and I've heard, that Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinians have worked very closely and collaborated on a solution for the water and desalinization, and I think it's a fact. And I just want to say that I came here in good faith. The title of this briefing is the Israeli-Palestinian Working Group, and I thought that that meant that you were working together for a solution. You say, one of you says you are, but all I've heard, as I've always heard at the UN for years now, is Israel bashing, and I am really very disappointed.
Thank you. Well, just to clarify, the Israel-Palestine Working Group is a working group that works for a just peace in the Middle East according to international law and according to UN resolutions. So we do have a perspective, and it is both international human rights law, international law, and UN resolutions.
But it doesn't sound that way in this room today.
We are here as the co-editors of Palestine-Israel Journal. And I started the journal together with my late friend, Victor Sigelman, who came to me in '93 and he said, "Listen, now there is a new era. You are publishing a newspaper in Hebrew called Gesher, and I am in your Outlook. Now we have to do something jointly to support the peace process." And we started the journal, the Palestine-Israel Journal, in order to encourage debate over difficult and sensitive issues related to the negotiating process. We have several issues about settlements, about water, about land, about Jerusalem, about coexistence, about cooperation. We have many issues on this regard, and our goal in the Palestine-Israel Journal is to support the two-state solution and to encourage debate between Israelis and Palestinians. Now, the realities are not with us. The realities on the ground are against us. And we still believe that we should not lose hope and we should work together. But if we describe the situation as it is, this is the reality which we are living in. We did not come here to mislead anyone or to give false hope to anyone. We came here to talk, to tell you how we see the situation, to urge you to help us because we have a joint interest. And I said it several times today, that it's for the sake of the Israeli people and the Palestinian people that we need to conclude a settlement which will end the Israeli occupation and to stop this process of taking the Israeli society to an apartheid regime. If you are disappointed, I'm sorry, but we did not come here to please anyone or to disappoint anyone. We came here to talk about facts and realities.
And I'd just like to add that, yes, there is an organization you may be familiar with called Friends of the Earth Middle East, which has an Israeli, a Palestinian, and a Jordanian branch. And they are working together on water problems, trying to resolve certain things. And they have made some progress, no question about it. There still is a very basic, unequal situation between the Israeli existing state and the Palestinian lack of a state. Matter of fact, when the Palestine-Israel Journal was founded, there was a question of what should be the name of the journal. And everybody said, well, it should include the word Israel and the word Palestine. And which was brilliant, not realizing that 4 years later Google would be invented, and anyone looking for Israeli-Palestine issues, that comes up very high, because it says Israel and it says Palestine. The Palestinians made a request that, well, could we have the name Palestine first, because you, Israelis, already have a state, and we don't yet have a state. And the Israelis all agreed. And so we have the Palestine-Israel Journal, even though many people instinctively, when they say the name, they say Israel-Palestine. But it's Palestine-Israel. To create the imbalance, we want to create that balance. We have co-editors, an Israeli and a Palestinian co-editor. We have 32 members of the editorial board, an equal number, 16 Israelis, 16 Palestinians. All the Israelis are Israeli patriots. All of the Palestinians are Palestinian patriots. The goal is to work together, to explore, to find a solution for the sake of both people. And that's what we're working on.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Perhaps this is a good place to end our conversation. Thank you very much for being with us, and please bring our greetings back to the